Mr. David Smith, I think San Antonio River Authority. Welcome to the Commissioners Court. We're running a little late here, so David Smith started off.
So you guys just took an important action, but in my humble opinion, the vote you're going to be asked to take on this is even more important. So
Concur.
After the Bidle Creek events recently, the county judge's office asked the River Authority to prepare a post-event report on what they believe happened. When I read the report, I was struck by the level of modeling they were capable of doing on that creekway. So I asked Derek for a meeting and said, Derek, can we do it this same level of modeling on all our creekways? And he said, not only can we, but we're in the process of doing it. And in fact, I think he's more than half the way there. So then I asked the next question, which was, if we have predictive models in place, why can't we put in a set of predictions that says, I'll use your Commissioner Moody, your precinct. You put an inch of rain per hour for 3 hours over Helotes Creek, what's going to happen? 2 inches per hour for 3 hours, 3 inches, 4 inches. Have that sitting on a shelf countywide, or better yet, plugged into some automated system. Derek already has meteorologists on standby for these events. So if you could put that modeling in place with the appropriate technology, near real-time rain gauge sensors, feeding that data into a model that already exists, why couldn't we proactively instruct people to shut down the low water crossings before the flooding ever happens? And he said, yes, we can do it. And a week later, I was talking about money with him. So I want to thank Derek and his team for responding so quickly. He's calling it the next generation flood warning system. What I think it does is has the potential to be a game changer locally and to turn first responders into pre-responders. With that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, Judge. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Derek Bays, General Manager and CEO of the San Antonio River Authority, and I'm also the Chairman of Region 12, the Regional Flood Planning Group that was stood up by the state in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. Steve Metzler is with me. He is our Director of Water Resources and one of our technical experts. I'd also like to recognize our Chairman, Mr. Jim Campbell of the San Antonio River Authority Board. Should I use this for the clicker? Okay. So just a brief summary to talk about, the circumstances that lead San Antonio to have the flooding challenges that it does. We sit at the base of the Balcones Escarpment. You have a unique intersection of western and coastal plains. You have a lot of unpredictable weather. You have a rapid elevation change. A lot of people don't realize, but it's actually over 800 feet in elevation change in a very short period of time. And then the ground underneath, impervious limestone, a lot of erosive soils, and very steep slopes in places, all of which leads to a combination that makes us, in prime location in flash flood alley, and has led to a number of, unfortunate and tragic events over the years. But why we're here today, as David described, and I appreciate his comments about my team, we have a lot of really smart people, far smarter than I am, I will say. The meteorologist he referred to is not only a meteorologist, but also a professional licensed engineer, which is one of the more unique combinations I've come across in my career. But it's folks like that really give us a chance to get ahead of these sort of things, and that's why I'm here today to talk about what we hope will be county investment, because things change. Development changes, population, the growth that the region has seen in the last number of years certainly adds to the challenges that we face. Technology changes. Just the event of AI itself has led to a number of developments, and we think it's time to reevaluate how our models and our predictive flood models work. And also weather changes. We see more unpredictable events. We see more severe events that are oftentimes very localized, like we saw with the unfortunate incident on Bidle Creek in June. where 13 people lost their lives. So this just highlights the unique challenges that we face in our region. I will say too, there are not only the San Antonio River runs through Bexar County, but you have 5 major creeks, and you have countless number of smaller creeks and waterways that, as the water flows, contributes to the risk to both people's lives and people's property. Brief history. So the Bexar Regional Watershed Management Partnership, or the BRWM, was formed back in 2002. Started with a response to the floods of 1998, and then brought together again by flooding in the early 2000s. What it is now is a virtual flood district, which has 22 public entities within Bexar County, the leaders of which are Bexar County, the San Antonio River Authority, and the City of San Antonio. Since 2002, we collectively have invested over $2 billion in flood mitigation projects. That is the county bond programs, that is city bond, that is river authority technology and development, and that also includes operations and maintenance, annual smaller projects that don't meet the bond, but $2 billion. But what I'm here to say is, as I said, times change, and we believe it is also time to continue that investment and use all these reasons to take us to the next level. This is just a quick snapshot, but this Bexar Regional Watershed Management, we run a website called bearflood.org. It currently pulls in gauge data from the county gauge network, the city gauge network, River Authority gauge network, and others. There's a floodplain viewer, there's a watershed master plan viewer. But this data is also used currently to help populate things like Waze and Google Maps. And we're in discussions with Apple right now. So what we're talking about today is, what does that roadmap to the future look like? When David and I met 2 weeks ago, man, it doesn't seem like 2 weeks ago. But I think we challenged each other to really say, what does the best-in-class system look like? How do we progress the safety and the security of our community? I will highlight, you can never eliminate risk. Anybody who works in the flood world will tell you that, but there are things we can do to help reduce and mitigate it. And that's what I want to talk to the court about today. It's going to take multiple things. Some of those we believe we can start immediately or in the very near term, next couple of months. Some will take probably a year. Others will take longer than that when you get into major infrastructure projects, but you have to start somewhere. And so the goals of this multi-pronged approach, reduce or eliminate the water rescues at low water crossings, improve our technology. Again, things change so rapidly in the technological world. We think we can do a lot more. We updated our predictive flood model, what we call predictive flood 2.0. Roughly 4 years ago was when we rolled that out, but a lot has changed since then. Get more structures out of the floodplain and the floodway, and above all, make everything more resilient to be able to respond to events as future weather conditions change. So this multi-pronged approach, the flood warning system is the primary reason that I'm here today speaking to the court, but it also means flood infrastructure. Those are those big projects that people often associate with bond programs. Those are part of this. Communications and advocacy. I think it's oftentimes easy to forget about that, but making sure the public knows and is constantly reminded. What we often see following a major disaster, whether that's here, New Orleans, where I came from previously, or anywhere across the country, that memories fade and complacency starts to set in. And so we believe it's incumbent upon any sort of program to make sure that the risks and the dangers that remain stay in the forefront of people's minds. And then finally, with whatever system that we build, the county builds, anyone who's in this takes on, you have to maintain it and you got to keep it up and running. So since David, and I had that discussion a couple weeks ago, working with Art and the county's public works team, input from the city of San Antonio, we came up with cost estimates for what we think we need for the region to get a much more improved flood warning system. And what you see there is the top two lines are roughly $22 million. That's the Bexar County system, the city of San Antonio system. There's another, we estimate, 32, almost $33 million worth of needs. I want to highlight, those are not in Bexar County. Those would be in our jurisdiction, which goes downstream to Wilson, Carnes, and Goliad. But also, we would look to expand the network and the flood warning system in the 4 counties that are adjacent, generally on the northern side of Bexar County, because as you can see going back, the watershed on the right is far bigger than my jurisdiction. It's far bigger than Bexar County, and there's a lot of creeks and rivers that flow into our jurisdiction. This is a cliche, but I think it's often important to repeat, is that water does not care about political boundaries. So a total right now is our estimate of roughly $55 million. We've sent that forward to the legislature, but there's a lot of uncertainty in what they will focus on. But I think we can take action working with our partners at the county today to, regardless of what happens, to be, stand on our own and move this system forward. I won't go into all the details. If there are any specific questions as I go along or at the end, Steve Metzler here can help answer some of the more technical questions, but a little over $10 million currently estimated. What you see is low water, essentially an improvement in gauges, in the type of gauges, the quantity of gauges, the SCADA system or the automated system that takes in all of this data and helps process it and send it to the appropriate place, whether it's our predictive flood system or the Emergency Operations Center. A big chunk of this is low water crossing gates, roughly almost just under $5 million of that, which are also an important part. There is no silver bullet to mitigating flood problems. There are gauges and there are warnings, there are gates, there's better software, there's communication. None of it can do it by itself. It takes a combination of these types of efforts. And then also upgrading our software, which helps, we believe will help get the system, take that gauge network, run it faster, run it better, and look for that more detailed analysis that David referred to. Very similar, these are the needs within the city of San Antonio. Also, same thing, gauges, improving the programming, more gauges, and then a lot of low water crossing gates and warning systems. Almost 2/3 roughly of their needs sit with the low water crossing gates. And just quick example. So this roadmap, this flood warning system, right now, both in the gauge network and our own computer software network, we have proprietary technology. That's what was available at the time. We want to get away from that. We believe that it will be faster and more efficient, and in the long run, actually probably cheaper to get away from proprietary and be able to use things that are more readily available. Expand and improve on that system of sensors and proactive alerts. It boils down to time, because the faster that a gauge can read something and get it to our system, we can feed it to the EOC, we can feed it to our predictive flood, and that shortens the time for first responders to get out there and do what they need to, for public works to get out there and block roads if necessary, but time is very, very critical. And then update that predictive flood model, which is an ongoing process, but we think we can take it to the next level with the county's support. So immediate, make sure all those gauges are working, and also do some reprogramming to get gauge alert thresholds that have additional warning levels. That will help feed more information. That's probably 3 to 6 months ballpark as we work through this. And I should emphasize, we are still working through costs. We think we can refine those as we go, and that will help drive a better timeline that we can come back to the court and discuss once we've got a better handle on it. But our current estimate is probably 3 to 6 months. Short term, standardize that programmable equipment, get manually low water crossing gates out. If the end state when it comes to a low water crossing gate is that it's automated, that there's a trigger from like a rain gauge or a stream gauge it'll automatically close. But in the interim, work towards getting gates in the appropriate places that a crew can go out and close by hand. single command center, single node, so it can be easily shared with all partners, the city, the county, the suburban cities that we work with, neighboring counties, up to the state, wherever it needs to go, that's the end state. And then get our new software, our new predictive flood model, what we're calling 3.0, and take that to the next level. That is probably a 12-month process at our current estimate. And then long-term, leverage that predictive flood model to help get better in future infrastructure needs and get those low water crossing barricade gates automated. This looks a little busy, but I think what you see on the left as I'm looking at the screen, it's that network of stream and rain gauges, and I think that's important. It's not just a rain gauge, you need the stream gauges too. Those all will feed into, currently feed into the city and the county sensors, some of our own. They all come together at the River Authority, and then they get pushed out through bearflood.org or through Waze or Google Maps or to the appropriate EOCs as necessary. But we think there is a better way as we progress. And I'll talk about that in a second. I talked briefly about communications and advocacy. We can't forget about this, but the public service campaigns, regularly reminding people about the risk they take about flooding and what it can do and what is important to remember. We even had discussions internally. Some of my staff have kids that have just gone through driver's ed, and their relay was that there's not one single mention of what to do when you're dealing with driving on a flooded road, a heavily flooded road. They talk about rain when it's wet, but there's a big difference when you're driving. Public awareness for when we get that new software and hardware out there, and then just continued additional outreach. And O&M, this is always the tricky part because, again, memories fade. And it's not a new piece of software, it's not a new dam, it's not one of those things, but it takes maintenance to keep them up and to have them do their job and perform when the time comes. So we want to make sure that O&M stays to the forefront of all of our minds. But I also want to say, right now we have the city's network, the county's network, some river authority. We believe it's best that there's one entity that runs that flood warning system. We need to work out details with David and his team and propose them back, but we think the River Authority is in an excellent position to take on that responsibility. We welcome that challenge. And then the county continues its operations and maintenance for those structural and non-structural mitigation assets. So with that, Judge, Commissioners, that concludes my presentation. My team and I are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Commissioner Calvert?
Thank you, Judge. Thank you very much, Derek, for the great presentation. Let me just ask you a little bit about the gates. When we look at the infrastructure around the Perrin-Vital area, we saw metal barricades completely ripped, bent like pieces of paper, concrete destroyed. Are these simply, I saw that photo pretty fast, are these like high alert arms, or are these a more substantial structure?
These arms would be located out of the floodway instead of...
They're arms, so.
They're arms, yeah. They are subject to being damaged and being hit by debris, but they'll be located outside the floodway so that it minimizes the opportunity for being damaged.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make, I'm glad you're thinking about that. We also had an issue of vandalism out in our East Central area where as soon as we put it down, I can't believe somebody stole it, but they did.
Right.
And you've got security cameras, you've got all that infrastructure there, as well as the lighting, and the solar lighting is a great thing that can really help because in a lot of these places, especially in the unincorporated county, you don't have the ability to see because there's no lights out there. So I appreciate that as part of this overall package. Let me ask you if what I've learned jives with what you all have seen. When you talk about the larger infrastructure projects, I think I have to make it clear that in my conversations, or at least in hearing the Kirk County conversation and the San Antonio Bexar County conversation, the real solution is not high alert arms and these systems, it's better flood control projects. These are larger infrastructure projects, a combination of things, but you can be stuck in, a high water situation in a very fast way if you don't have larger retention and detention. And in the case of the Paramvital corridor, it's my understanding that there was 6 and 6.2 inches of rain that fed the two basins, the watershed, within a 5 square mile radius within that time period, that caused the water to be the way it was. But the impervious cover, the fact that you had all this concrete across the Paramvital corridor, is what drove that speed of the water as it came, down into the catchment basin of Vital Creek. And that what is needed then is additional retention, detention, natural vegetative areas like what the county did on Fredericksburg Road at the old Spanish Trail. Soccer fields really is what they are now, that would slow that water out to go into the ground and be retained or detained. Does that jive with what you're seeing, let's say, for the Paramvital Creek area?
Yeah, I'll start, and then Steve can also jump in. But yeah, I think, gray infrastructure, if you will, the big things that you just mentioned, Commissioner, detention, retention basins, that type of thing, have to be any part of a plan, a comprehensive plan based on the area that we live and serve in. You also mentioned the more natural and nature-based solutions. Those are important as well. In fact, the county had done a project on Vital Creek a number of years ago that is a more vegetated area, and you do not see the same damage that we saw in the concrete-lined areas. So I think it's a matter of knowing, what the appropriate tool is to deal with that particular problem at any given time. It's a combination, but it all has to be part of that big discussion.
Yeah.
You stole some of my thunder, but yeah, absolutely. The transitioning to detention and retention is a big part of it, but that is only a solution. It's bringing back the natural stream bank is what we've done, especially on that Vital Creek where we've added a wide spot in the stream. So just upstream of Vicar Road it's very channelized and narrow, and I think you identified the speed of the water going through there. But just downstream of Vicar Road on Vital Creek, same stream, same flows, but it got very wide and flat in that area, and that allowed the stream to slow down, and those destructive speeds just were eliminated. So it really wasn't even in detention; it was just how the stream was shaped, and that's what we focus on at the River Authority.
So I grew up in the area. I used to ride my bike all along the area. Actually, those ditches were not built when I was a kid. They were actually built afterwards. One of the things that we saw, if you go behind the academy in that area around 410, there is a warehouse business that's been abandoned where they had a metal fence, and that metal fence was completely flat because the water took the metal bars and just made them flat. But the good part about it being abandoned is that could potentially be an area for acquisition for a retention, detention, sports park, kind of greenery area, because the drainage ditch is 15, I don't know, between 12 and 20 feet. And I just happened to go back into my old neighborhood up Paramvital to see how the water, whether or not it went into the neighborhood, and it did. It was still sitting there some days later after the storm, and that has me concerned for the residents that I represent in the area, that even though there's this, what I would call pretty big drainage channel, there is still, without additional flood mitigation around the catchment corridor, there is still high risk that there will be another incident that causes mass flooding in residents and other areas. So one of the questions I have, I think a lot of residents want to know, with respect to the cleanup, there's still a lot of rubble there. And how do you think that impacts our drainage that's existing today? And when will we get that so that the channel flows and isn't obstructed by that rubble? Any thoughts about that?
I will let Steve answer the technical portion of, what does that potentially do to the flow. I know that the city of San Antonio has requested $21 million in their legislative ask, specifically for debris cleanup in regards to that Vital Creek flood. It does not reach the FEMA threshold, which is $50 million plus worth of damage. So they're asking the special session for that to assist with that. I don't have a current timeline on their debris removal efforts. But I think you did bring up a good point, Commissioner. It's not just, infrastructure, but there are also other considerations. In that same general area, there was a buyout program previously where homeowners, were bought out of their property that were prone to repetitive flooding, and that probably saved, a number of properties and potentially lives during this most recent event. So I think there are a lot of tools. There are things like home elevation programs. There are things like, don't build in the floodway, but also, should we look at what does the 100-year look like? We've seen success in other areas where there's a buffer adjacent to waterways. Doesn't have to be super wide, but that can help absorb some of that overflow when a stream hits flood level or a river hits flood level. So again, I think there's a menu of tools that can be applied, but every circumstance and terrain and geography is a little bit different.
Yeah. As far as what kind of impacts the debris does in the channel, how it affects the water, absolutely causes floodwaters to rise. So
Floodwater to rise, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In engineering terms, we'd call it a hydraulic loss, but
Right. Absolutely.
the effect is the water gets backed up in those regions. So, and it doesn't have to be construction debris or any of the debris from that was impacted, like you saw it landed on Vicar Drive. But anytime trash makes its way into our streams and waterways, every little bit adds up. I mean, how many tons did we pull out last year? I mean, there's tons of trash makes its way into a watershed. So it's not just unsightly, it makes a big impact on floodwaters.
Well, I do want to point out that, I've never seen Texas, the state of Texas, use the rainy day fund for one of our rainiest days, and I find it ironic.
A little bit.
And really an outrage that we've been through the ice storm, we've been through floods, and we never use our rainy day fund to help local communities. It would be nice, since the feds haven't kicked in on their threshold, if the state could help get this thing taken care of, because that's what it's there for. And it's literally the rainy day. With respect to the trash that's in our waterways, we as an office struggle all the time with calls where people have drainage ditches that are overflowing with vegetation. My neighborhood right now, I've been trying to get Union Pacific and the city of San Antonio to clean up, where the drainage has 8-foot grass. It's just terrible. Because we really worry about, on a street like mine where it's one way in and one way out, what will happen if we have another rain coming. It's not necessarily a pretty scene because we are next to a waterway, Salado Creek, one of your major focus areas here. But the question I have for you is with respect to the boons. We did the litter boon for the first time across several of our waterways. I've often thought about the trash buildup being ameliorated by litter boons. We've never had a real systemic implementation in this community, but I think some others have begun so. Can you give me your thoughts about, one, from your maintenance standpoint, I'm sure it's a lot easier than what we normally do in the cleanups, but as part of this whole flood mitigation, if we're talking about tons of trash in our waterways, how can litter boons, what would the impact be? Is this something that's ever been measured?
I'm not sure about the measurement. I know that the River Authority has experimented or pilot project with booms in a couple of different places. A lot of it depends on the design of the boom, the location of the boom, and then the type of water that hits it. Oftentimes you see with boom systems, as soon as you get a really heavy rain, it's the effect is mitigated because it just all washes over. The other challenge we have is thatch. All the cut grass from mowing that blows in, that is heavier, generally speaking, than any trash that might hit the boom. And so it is sinking it down, dragging it down, and clogging it up, and therefore it's not being effective for trash. It is something I'm absolutely willing to look at as we explore this further. Again, it's a tool in the tool shed to help mitigate that. But yes, we pull tens of thousands of pounds from Mission Reach of trash every year. The city, I'm not even sure what they pull from behind Olmos Dam, which is a collection point for a lot of those areas north. And that's just in two sort of major areas. That doesn't count West Side Creeks, your neighborhood where you talked about. And so I think when you talk about trash, it is a multi-pronged approach there as well. There is an education aspect, which we have done. We have tried to do some of at the River Authority when people, don't throw stuff in the bed of your pickup and then drive down the road because it all blows out. Pick up your dog, pick up after your dog. But you just have to keep talking about it. But I think there's other things too. I mean, we've floated the idea to the city of, how often are they looking at, when do people put out their trash cans? Do they put them, there's a window, typically 24 hours before pickup, and they have to pick it up within 24 hours after pickup. Are they putting it out early? Are they leaving it out? Because oftentimes you see that those things tip over, dogs, whatever, and then all of a sudden you have a bunch more stuff in the street. So, and more constant pickup. Are there street sweeper cleaning opportunities in critical areas, which our water quality work has looked at, that make more of a difference than just doing things on a regular basis? You get more bang for your buck in some places than others. So booms are part of that. We could probably talk about trash, and if you talk to my field crews, that is their number one frustration, because when you're trying to get, a plastic bag or a beer six-pack or whatever it is from a tree that's 12 feet up in the air, it is, and it's up and down the Mission Reach, it is pretty frustrating. So we would love, whether it's part of this discussion or related but separate discussion, to talk more about trash, because it is a problem and it is frustrating.
Well, we're just beginning what I think is a very healthy conversation for the community. I spoke about these issues because they're not often talked about in the press. We need to talk about these multitudes of ways that we combat our flooding in Flash Flood Alley. Let me just say on behalf of our constituents, thank you to the River Authority, thank you, Derek, thank you for what you do, and your team who work very hard to try to keep our waterways flowing right. So we'll continue to support you and do things to help that effort. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Moody.
Well, thank you, Judge, and thank you for being here and presenting, and David for bringing this item forward. Appreciate your comments, Commissioner Calvert. I'm really excited about this conversation. I think this is a real opportunity, a moment that we need to seize, both as a county, as a city, as a region, and I hope we do that. We had a conversation a week ago on this, and I've been giving it a lot of thought, but one of the things I mentioned was, when we talk about flooding and disaster response and everything, what are our priorities? It can be property protection and flood mitigation, or it could be, maintaining access, roadways, think low water crossings, or it can be the protection of human life, right? I think that no one's going to argue with me that our number one priority should be the protection of human life. And so when we think about the tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, even billions of dollars that get spent in this space, a lot of times on engineering projects that help in those other categories, more can be done with a higher return on investment when it comes to protecting human life. And I think this project speaks to that specifically. So that $10 million for Bexar County seems like really high ROI for protecting human life when it comes to flooding. I do want to just mention a few other things from your analysis here in your presentation. I think it's important that these tools, and again, I don't want to say that this is the be-all, the end-all solution, but I think it's a huge step forward in the direction we need to go, where we have real-time and predictive analysis around floodwaters before they get there, right? And so we can warn our constituents, our citizens, and make sure we protect them from a situation that could cause, life-threatening situation. So obviously, you talked about the halt system, how that could be tied in with the modeling and better information. And this goes to kind of the comms argument. As much as I agree with everything you have on the comm sheet, I'd like to see it go further and talk about, and maybe this isn't just the Bexar County thing, maybe this is a state effort, right? Where we think today about like Amber Alerts, and, you know, your phone's like, you know, and you can't ignore it. I saw you mention Waze and Google Maps, right? And obviously that feeds in and can say, oh, roadway's flooded. But beyond that, I think there's a more aggressive alert system that we could try to incorporate, geo-fenced to cell phones that are traveling down a roadway that has predictive analysis that roadway is going to be covered in less than 5 minutes, and warning those individuals, you know, that they are risking their lives if they continue down the current road, right? I would love to see us continue to move down that path and try to have a system so robust and so, you know, tech savvy. Just a couple other comments, and I'll go ahead and pass. But in here, I do think it's very important that with all the growth and development and increased impervious cover, that this model obviously has to continue to be updated, right? Because as we have hundreds of acres continue to turn into concrete, rooftops, streets, we need to continue to update those models, because that flooding risk will change with each and every one of those new roadways. So we need to think about that, and also what are those recurring costs when it comes to going forward and maintaining that model at that high threshold. So I would encourage us to include that as we go forward. I think we really need to have that outreach with the city of San Antonio, and hopefully they buy into this as well. And this is a partnership where they're aligned on it, and we can go forward together, partner and invest in this space. I don't know exactly where all those conversations stand today, or if any of those have taken place with council, but I would encourage us to have those. And then I was going to ask you specifically, around the surrounding counties, have we had any of those discussions, or is that all down the road?
You want to talk, Kendall?
Yes, absolutely. We've already started talking with Wilson, Carnes, and Goliad. Those are in the River Authority's jurisdiction, and we've already got 95 locations identified for potential low water crossing gauges, and we've got 3 already teed up, ready to go out the door. So we're trying to get ILAs in place so we can get those installed sometime over the next couple of weeks, couple of months. So that's kind of the first thing. Those kind of conversations were already happening. As a matter of fact, they started happening April, May, before the storms ever hit. So this is something that's been on our focus, our radar for quite some time. And so we're trying to branch out into those other counties, just because we know we're in a kind of a catbird seat, if you will, of being a regional provider. So we've got a really good position on knowing where all of the gauges are and what they're capable of, and extending those capabilities to the regions that don't have the expertise or resources to develop them. So we're already going down that path. And as far as your comment about updating the model, that is something that we do pretty regularly. We're going through a model update right now because of not only impervious cover as a result of development, but rain data is updated every couple of years as part of what's called the Atlas program. And right now we're in Atlas 14, 15 is coming up soon. But whenever the Atlas 14 came out, we began to update all of our flood models. So that's been an ongoing process, and we've done that for 3 of the watershed, 3 of the creeks and streams. We've got 3 more to go. So it's all in progress.
And when it comes to the northern counties, or generally northern of Bexar County, those are outside of our legal jurisdiction, but we certainly have discussions with them, and there's been dialogue with Kendall County about our floodplain mapping. We are one of the only 2 providers in the state that FEMA trusts to handle floodplain mapping on their behalf. It's us and Harris County Flood Control in Houston, but we have a certain boundary on that right now. And Kendall, for example, is interested and has been talking to us about expanding our work into their area via an ILA that FEMA or they would pay for, not with funds within our current jurisdiction. So that dialogue is happening. We talk to, our sister entities frequently, but there's obviously a lot more that needs to happen too.
Yeah.
Commissioner?
Yes.
One of the challenges of this proposal is legally, I can't use county money outside of Bexar County.
Right.
So for these other counties, I think that's another partnering opportunity between us, the city, and the River Authority, while the legislature's in session, to advocate for the state to provide funding for those counties.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up because I think, we need to engage those counties. We need to engage with ACOG and other water boards, to not only understand, maybe other ideas that they have or other best practices that we could try to integrate, but how do we advocate together, at the state legislature or going forward, how are we going to fund some of these projects that have a benefit across county lines, obviously. So I think the more communication we can have on that front, the sooner the better. I'm happy to help be an advocate in Austin. I think that, again, this seems like a really high return on investment project. I would go as far as to say that before we spend another $10 million on a low water crossing, let's spend the $10 million on making sure that we have this early warning system in place.
Thanks, sir.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Thank you, Judge. I'm going to be brief. It's been a long day, but this is important. Derek, thank you for being here and your patience, because I think we were supposed to get to this a little while back. But, let me ask David, because I know, first of all, let me acknowledge David kind of coming up with the brainstorming with the judge on this really important initiative. And, regardless of the money, it's worth it because of the what's at stake in saving lives. But speaking of the money, do we have funding identified yet? Is it going to be phased? Are we talking about, I saw roughly a $50 million price tag for the entire package. Tell me a little bit about what you're thinking with the funding source.
So it won't be 50 million from the county because 32 of it's for outside of Bexar County.
Right.
It could be 20 million for the county, but to be honest with you, I'm hoping the city wants to partner with us and pay for their 11 million. So what the actual recommended motion is to direct me to address funding in the upcoming budget.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
One way or another, I want Derek to walk out of this meeting and get to work.
Yeah.
So you're going to have your money, one way or another.
And when you say county, I'm assuming obviously you're talking about the unincorporated areas, but the suburban cities are going to need help too.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I think of Leon Valley, which historically has pretty bad flooding in my precinct. So again, I don't want to belabor the point. Important initiative. It is a core function of what county government should be doing in terms of flood control and protecting lives. So I appreciate very much your work on this. Look forward to getting an update down the road. And if there's not been a motion made yet, I'll make a motion that we direct staff to move forward with this.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Rodriguez, second by Commissioner Clay Flores. Commissioner Clay Flores.
Yeah, I just want to thank David Smith for your innovation in putting this together and reaching out to them to put it together. And instead of next generation flood warning system, I think it should be called the David Smith flood warning system. We need a good laugh. It's been a long day. But this is vitally, I am serious. That's what I'm going to call it. Me and my constituents in our precinct, it is the David Smith flood warning system. So this is really, really important, and I appreciate that despite, we're in budget season, everyone's not going to get what they want, but this is really important to put the funding here, so I'm happy to second. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion. Any further comment, question? Let me again thank Derek and your team, Jim Campbell, the board. We've had a great, excellent relationship since I've become county judge, and you've kind of brought me up to speed in all the flooding, drainage issues that, and the projects that you'll have worked with in regards with the county, especially Judge Wolf, Commissioner Elizondo with that San Pedro Creek, which obviously is a tremendous success. So again, let me echo my thanks to David Smith and his leadership and his team for bringing this matter. I think what I'd like to just conclude today's comment is just, let's not forget, what was it, June 12th? The Bidle Creek flooding and 13 victims
Yes, sir.
that could have been avoided had we, hopefully it had a warning system. I believe Sarah, San Antonio River Authority, you stepped up to do an immediate independent assessment, which has helped the city and county figure out what needs to be done. What has transpired after that, obviously, was the July 4th flooding up in Kerr County in the Hill Country, which had had much more devastation and victims, and the review has been quite brutal. I will tell you that that review has reminded me what my primary job as county judge is, and that's to protect this county. There's a lot of other things I have to do to show up and do things or preside over meetings, but I better damn well make sure that if there's any weather events or catastrophic events or anything in this county, I better be up and at 'em, and being asleep or being out of town is not going to probably give me much excuse. The public will have a demand on me as to why I didn't react in the way I did. So what is truly empowering about the idea that David has brought out and Derek, y'all have embraced, is the fact that this seems to be, and I'm wanting to really see how this thing's going to work, but this really gets to be more preventive. In addition, it's really pre-proactive, so to speak, that if we can get these models and these gauges down, and obviously we have an existing system in effect now, so there's some, we got to go fix things that have not been fixed. Perhaps in a while, we need to upgrade, get the latest software, we got to get the right vendors in, and I know that San Antonio River Authority, with your expertise, we're going to have the state-of-the-art, we're going to have the right system, the right software, the right vendor to make sure that we have a structure that will last many years and not just go out of date, so to speak. The other part that we didn't touch upon but has been discussed in meetings, especially with me, is that we hope to have a future discussion of a regional, and what we hope is this is one piece towards a regional perspective of how we can incorporate our surrounding counties, especially our rural counties that are obviously definitely impacted by whatever watershed issues we have, or whatever remediation we do will affect other communities, and we need to partner up, and I'm looking forward to that conversation. And Sarah, that's well within your purview and jurisdiction of having adjoining counties to be joining that. So I want to encourage you and your board to include our regional partners, especially our county judges out there, to say, hey, we want to also be part of the solution. And then looking towards whatever, the federal funding, state funding that can help supplement. I believe, David, you have basically, so that the public understands, we'd had a big discussion earlier about some big projects that we have now made a decision, but I want to remind the public, and I want to remind the people here in the court, that we're still taking care of business. And this is really something that I hope that we can partner with the city of San Antonio, Commissioner Moody, and that obviously, but this is a reminder that city residents, city taxpayers are also county residents and county taxpayers. And I think sometimes city, county kind of gets, we sometimes get caught up in saying, we're not responsible for city of San Antonio because that's the city of San Antonio. We are stepping up to make sure that all residents of Bexar County, including the city of San Antonio, including the suburban cities, including the unincorporated areas, are all part of this next gen warning system. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. Thank you very much. I call for a vote. Commissioner Moody.
Just parliamentary inquiry. What is the vote, the motion before us?
So the motion was to direct staff to identify funding this budget cycle for implementation.
Okay, I guess, and my question was just around the specificity of this deal versus, obviously, we want to support this sort of movement, but I think there were conversations about like opportunities to add on to it and explore further, so I assume that's kind of included here for staff to look at details and potential opportunities.
Outside of what was presented, you mean? I don't know if that's, I was just thinking what was presented, the motion was to direct staff to look for funding sources for those ideas. I don't know what you're talking about outside of that.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
So,
Commissioner Moody.
and maybe you can just address it. Obviously, this was turned around very quickly, right? And to me, I saw this as a first draft in terms of what we think makes sense and what we'd like to do. I'm not trying to undermine it in any way, but I'm not sure, you know, whether we're 100% confident that this is the plan we want to make sure is in the budget versus this is the direction we want to go, but there may be other things we want to tweak and continue to play with as we go forward here into the budget season. That's just what I was trying to get at.
I mean, I called it a roadmap on purpose. Yes, there are a lot of details that need to be worked through that I think are at this, you know, many of those are at the staff level, and we work with David and his team on that. But yeah, I mean, we are continuing to refine this as we go along. You know, prior to the floods of June and July, we had a update to our regional watershed master plan in the works. We are reviewing the draft right now. We anticipate, you know, by the end of August roughly, that we will be able to come back to both the county and the city and say, if you are considering future bond projects for large infrastructure programs, here is our recommendation on how you prioritize limited dollars. That's just one example, but, you know, the team has been meeting not daily, but pretty darn close to flesh this out, you know, develop the schedule. It's a, you know, there is a flow chart of do this before this, and the accompanying schedule. So all of that is underway. I don't know everything yet because we are still looking, you know, what do we want to benchmark ourselves against? Because we want to be, you know, best in class, best in the country. So that is all being figured out, but we feel pretty confident that this is the right start. And after that, or in addition to that, you know, as discussions between the court and David go, but, you know, there's some things in here we regard as critical to keep the system, to get it to the next level. And then there are other things that we would love to talk about doing more, whether it's trash, as Commissioner Calvert talked about, or other things. But this is a bigger discussion, but this gets the ball moving, in our opinion.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner Moody?
I believe so, just that this is a roadmap. It's laid out, but this is directing staff to continue to find funds for this starting point and further refine the roadmap going forward.
So just to be clear, what I'm going to recommend to Commissioners Court is at a minimum, we are going to fund the cost for the suburban cities in the unincorporated area. But what I'm telling Derek is whether another partner steps in to fund the 11 million for the city or not, I'll find the 11 million because they're county residents too. So I'm taking the mission initially 10, but if it needs to be the full 21, I'll do it.
I'm sorry, how long have we spent on this item? Does anyone know about an hour? We just spent an hour talking about how important this is, how no one will disagree with me, it's important to save lives. And now we're gonna talk about, I mean, we need to pass it, right? We're not gonna wait for the state, we need to pass it. Hopefully the city will come on board, hopefully we can get reimbursed from the state, but I thought we just spent an hour talking about how important it is, and we're gonna do it.
With that, we'll call the vote.
Well,
Like, I just
Ajacia,
don't
if I
know why
could
we
really
decided
quick.
this.
We got more discussion then. Commissioner Moody, go ahead.
Well, I just not sure where the comments are coming from. We're obviously supportive here. We're trying to just make sure that we take the right steps forward so we can protect our citizens in Bexar County. I think that's clear.
Okay. Anybody else? Calling for the vote. All those in favor of the motion by Commissioner Rodriguez, second by Commissioner Clayforce? I've lost. Or second by, who was it? Commissioner Moody? Elizabeth, who was it? I just
Who
want to make sure.
seconded? I did.
Okay, just get everybody the motion. All right. It's getting late in the day, guys. All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Just want a reminder, Sarah and County, we have called for a press conference at the conclusion. Don't know what time that will be. We're getting there. We're